Thank you so much for staying with Daybreak. The conversation continues now. We move over to the President Ruto defending the housing fund and the finance bill. But first, there's a lot of feedback coming through on the conversation we just had. Let's bring that up and then move on to the next part of it. We'd like to hear your views on every single subject that we're going to talk about here. Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. Let's bring that up and see what you're saying. Honorable Lilian CEO says the automation of revenue collection is one of the surest ways of improving revenue collection. Go cashless, but not the Nairobi way, where what's collected is not what's declared. The cost of collection should also make sense and reasonable, okay? Samuel Owuot says the government must employ alternative revenue generation measures away from imposing more taxation. Equally, taxation on basic kitchen commodities must be zero-rated to facilitate taxpayers afford at least a meal a day, okay? Remy Butia says Kenya's taxation regime raises three significant concerns: lack of clear tax policy objectives, erratic changes in the tax code, and multiple taxations at the national and county levels of government. And Bob Otieno says inherited a broke government from the last regime, and the only option they have now is to get money is by increasing more taxation, and the sooner we accept it, the better. Sir Nixon says the Boma Yangu platform, said to be the gateway into the affordable housing program, was started some few years ago by the government, where most of us registered via e-Citizen. Does it mean we abandon it now for the forced mortgage? All right? This is the conversation we're going to. And Chege, I'll start with you. On the finance bill, is it reasonable, the proposals that are being made? Even if you pick the first one, on the housing levy, for example. Is that a reasonable proposal?
Thanks. I think for me, the whole taxation issue needs to be relooked at. We need to, of course, the tax is the one that drives the country. We need to be taxing in a direction that builds the country. Number one, on issues of production, transportation, energy, petroleum. If you're going to put a lot of emphasis, I mean, the cost of electricity in the country is, I think, the highest or top highest in Africa. So how do you expect us to be able to compete with other people when it comes to production? In terms of transportation, how do you ensure our people are able to move from one point to another? And the petroleum is one of the cash cows that we're looking at. So for me, the taxation regime, all of it needs to be relooked at so that it supports strengthening growth of the country. Again, on the issues of housing fund, for me, I think it should not be like a forced direction. It should be very incentivized, because everyone would want to own a home. What is government doing in terms of now bringing the other players so that it's easy? I mean, look at Kileleshwa and Kilimani now. I mean, all these high-rise apartments, somebody just wants to be in Kilimani on 17th floor, whatever it is, for a small thing. If it was made a bit easier for people to invest and the other people that come into to that industry to be given latitude, so that people can be able to get very affordable mortgages. Mortgage in the country is, I think, less than 20%. It's very expensive to do any mortgage in this country. So for the taxation regime should be able to address those issues. If a government is coming up with a measure for a housing fund, then we can start at least from a voluntary based, where you're given a chance, government says we're going to match if you want to put this, and then we're able to direct it lightly. Finally, on the issue of county governments coming in, the county governments must be key stakeholders in this, because there's all these funds also we are controlling at the counties. Where are we driving them towards the areas where it's going to spur growth, especially in areas that we feel is going to multiply? And the construction, as we are doing construction, what about industrial areas and you know, other manufacturing things that will, one, be able to give us a lot of jobs, as opposed to doing, you know, flats are good and all that, but after it's done, that's it. It's a single unit, somebody gets in, and that's it. But in terms of all these monies that can be brought in, a lot of funding can be given to people who want to do business. And that's why as we talk this, and that's how I started by saying pending bills is a big issue. We need to find a way of bringing people who want to invest on the table and have a very clear discussion of how we want to proceed with the issues of taxation, with the issues of business opportunities and business environment for this, if we are able to move to the next.
So in general, when you look at this finance bill, are those reasonable proposals or not?
Some are not, because if you look at the proposal to tax the high-earning people, so how many are they in the bracket? So that even if you put 35%, what are we talking about? I think a bigger conversation would be, how do we broaden the people in the tax net, so we can be able to spread the people who are giving the shoulder to taxation. Okay. But before even we do that, what are we giving them in terms of incentives for them to be able to do that business so that we are able to tax them?
Okay.
You get? So for me, the direction should start from what do we need to do? How easy is it for you to access capital?
Yeah.
We are still under what they call Shylocks. Shylocks and these guys who suggest it's easy to get a car loan. You get a car, get quick cash, and then they pretend you've not paid in. They come for you. That should be the areas where we are looking at SACCOs. How do we make access to capital easier and affordable so that people can be able to do business? And then again, we must fix the political problem. Yeah. Once you've given them that, let's ensure that Tuesdays and Thursdays, people are allowed to work.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Jerry, now that we're talking about the housing levy, is it a reasonable proposal in your view?
I want to speak in general on the finance bill. And I want to say, Trevor, we are not in an ideal situation. An ideal situation is where we do things as they should be. And as we are right now, Trevor, 50%, over 50% of what we collect goes to service recurrent expenditure and debt. And you find that we have very little for development in this nation, and Kenyans want development. So you cannot demand from the government what they're not able to facilitate. What the finance bill is trying to do is trying to expand the tax base. But at the same time, perhaps we should look into ensuring that we improve the mechanisms of collection so that as we expand the tax base, we really do not burden just a section of Kenyans. We ensure that it is divided across board. 17% right now of our GDP is what tax contributes to, but we're trying to raise it to around 25%. If you look at the situation we're in, there's the proposed TUT, turnover tax, from 1% to 3%. There's VAT from 8 to 16%, and there's the housing levy, which is mandatory, to 3%. The housing levy, as the president has envisioned, it is supposed to be a savings plan. So it is supposed to enable us pool some funds so that we can be able to do what we call internal funding of projects. And after 6 years, there's a time period that is given where you can decide whether you want to claim your money, which will be having interest, or decide that you want to own a home. And these are things that are very emotive for Kenyans at the moment. You know, we know that we just came from a 9.2% inflation is to around 7.9%. But, you know, Kenyans are still struggling to make ends meet, and basic commodities are still very expensive. So once you raise the cost of maybe petroleum and the products, you raise the cost of production, you know, that affects service delivery, that affects the cost of basic commodities. So it is like a catch-22 situation for the president as we speak. You know, we still have to service the debt. We have a 2 billion euro bond that will be now falling into payment from next year. So we have all these things, but we also need to downsize our government. You know, our government is big, it is huge, it is, you know, there's this expenditure that we should not be incurring. So we need to discuss also austerity measures so that we can have these conversations with Kenyans. And perhaps from where I stand, because I know we have submissions on the public participation up to 20th of this month. Yeah. From where I stand, Trevor, we need to have better communication as the government, as the Kenya Kwanza government, so that people can understand where we're coming from. Because we have all these discussions around social media, but the fact is we have no money. People want development, they want health, they want education, they want a good environment for businesses, they want the transport sector to be funded, but where is this money coming from? So I really do feel that the president is caught up between, you know, a rock and a hard place, and we need to discuss with Kenyans on the way forward so that we can bring everyone on board and everyone can feel obligated to pay tax. Okay.
Eddie, on the finance bill, are they reasonable proposals? Even the housing levy, for example, let's start with that one.
You know, Trevor, the challenge of, and I try to be very objective and rational. Because the challenge of speaking as somebody who is seen to be in Azimio, then you look like you are always anti what the government is doing.
Yeah.
But I think that this regime is completely ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. And as young people, we should call it for what it is. Because it's a regime that came in power by a serious campaign on solving the income equation to the hustler, not on squeezing whatever a hustler has. You know, because when you talk about expanding tax base in Kenya, and then you start targeting as most sensitive place, and you know, Njeri here will tell you, because Njeri was an artist, and therefore more probably she frequented places like where we have young women who have finished school and cannot get opportunities, or even did not finish school. She will tell you that the salon industry is one of the biggest industries that accommodates and actually tries to anchor young women in this country to be able to just even have a bare minimum of their lives. Bare minimum. A simple thing as afford food, the money they make there. A lady will go to Kenyatta Market and then braid some hair, kidogo, and then make something like 400. If you do what we call a real aggregation of what the Ruto regime is proposing about this expansion of tax base, out of 400 that a young lady is making in Kenyatta Market, I am telling you, the Ruto regime is going to take 200 from them. Now that 200 that they are remaining with cannot feed their children, cannot be able to pay for their rent in Nairobi. And I'm telling you, if you allow this to continue, I'm telling you as young people, and especially because you're in the beauty industry, the excuse will now come from your hair to now.
It is attacking me. No? Protect me, Trevor.
I'll give you a chance to react. We're talking about the 5% excess duty on wigs, human hair.
Yeah, you know, like it's crazy. You know, I like the fact that there's something else that is very important, the spending in government. Okay? Because before you start thinking about where am I going to get this money here and there, you first of all must deal with your spending. In fact, when the bill was brought to us, the proposal of the debt management strategy that the CS brought to us, I sit in finance and budget, and one of the things that we sought to solve for us was that how can we first of all address the 700 billion deficit that the government is trying to justify? You must cut that down, because Trevor, these things are not brought from heaven. If you look at the African continent today, right? The tax to GDP ratio, right, is about 17% and 16% in the continent. If you look at a smaller country like Rwanda versus Kenya, for instance, you'll find that Kenyan's tax to GDP ratio is already 17%. It means that we have got about 6 million people who are registered in tax for taxation, and out of that 6 million, that makes about 12% of our population. Them alone, they give this country up to 20 billion worth of tax. And in Rwanda, you will find that it's about 2% of the population. That is 300,000 people who are registered to the tax base. It means that 2% translates to about only 2 billion. But if you look at the way Rwanda uses its taxes, it's more effective than us. There's a lot of leakages in government, a lot of bulk spending, especially in executive. I mean, you know very well that even in the budget that we have right now, the executive alone is about the executive and the national parastatals are getting 2.2 trillion. And then the institutions that are supposed to actually monitor them and cover them, the judiciary is getting less than 200 billion. And then, the judiciary is actually getting about 40 billion. Then the legislature is supposed to actually oversight them to use the money properly. Is not even getting proper money. So the spending in government on things like Sijui cars, you recently saw when Rigiji was going to Botswana, spent over 100 million just to go to a simple state visit in Botswana. These leakages in government are killing the economy. And another thing that is here, Trevor, is that we must, if I was to advise now the State House, let them do what we call tax impact assessment. And tax impact assessment would look at, are they really proposing things that are not there or are not working for Kenyans? Because if you look at the people who are the biggest tax evaders in this country, because our tax compliance right now is just, of that number is just that about 45% of that 6 million that I talked about. And that means that there are people who are supposed to pay taxes, and because they're in government, and I'm telling you as it is, because they're in government, their businesses don't pay taxes. The people in parastatal don't pay taxes. You see all these buildings that you're seeing in Nairobi, right? And mostly owned by government, and the land rates that you see, you've seen a lot of land rate problems in Nairobi. They don't pay taxes. So the people who are in power are shielded by their own power not to pay taxes, and then now they want to look at, hey, who else can we start looking for money from the other areas? These hustlers, let us bring them into the tax bracket. As I finish, Trevor, the issue of the housing, deductions that we're seeing, the 3% that is proposed. People are struggling with basic needs. That means that in every income that you get, what are your first tickets that you want to be able to deal with? You want to deal with food, you want to deal with housing, you want to deal with clothing, and then medicine comes into place, right? If you look at the young women in Dandora or every place, they want to buy their kids Panadol, they want to buy their kids aspirin. Now, if these people are working in a place where you are telling them you're going to increase another deduction called this housing fund, which you're actually forcing them to, because they're not obligated. In fact, it's going to fail, because if you go to court, you're forcing these people to actually save. It's not a mandatory thing. Pension alone, these people already are dealing with almost 12%. NHIF, these people are being deducted. Income tax, they are being deducted. So somebody is earning as little as 20,000. Even our police officers, as little as 20,000 in Jerry, and then you have to take 60% of their money in deductions. How much are they left to spend? And that means that the government is completely disconnected without reorganize this economy. Because if you want to organize this economy, you must increase money supply. Hiyo pesa ikitembea kidogo kidogo, when the money moves here and there, it makes it possible for people to spend, and it makes it possible for people to invest in the economy. Okay. If you are depressing what we call the disposable income, the money that people can be able to spend and be able to make a living, then how are you thinking that you're going to stimulate this economy? Okay. It's going to be impossible to stimulate.
Where's the role of oversight when it comes to both Parliament and the Senate? Because like now, this spending that you're talking about, we should be seeing a lot of it in agriculture, because the country is still agriculturally based. And agriculture solves a couple of issues, like one, cost of living in terms of food. You know, when somebody is just ameshiba, you know, is half solved, the problems are half solved. Why shouldn't we, using your offices, and you have a very good budget office, that looks at things in a very broad base. This impact assessment on taxation, you handle it at the national level, you guys handle it at the county level, because the same wastage is happening in the counties. So that needs to be looked at. And when now we are fighting for the 15% as counties, you now ask these governors, of the 15%, what are you directly moving to this? And the one that we gave you, how come you're not able to absorb? You know, and what needs to be happening so that we're able to strengthen this? Because the same handicaps you have, we even have them at the counties. The same problems are even translated downwards. If you look at something like healthcare, I mean, with now lifestyle diseases, it's a, you know, somebody was saying you are one sickness away to poverty. You think you are somewhere middle class over there. You are hit with one or your family member. You will sell everything trying to save this person. So that is a big problem, and the country needs to have a very concerted effort. I mean, away from parties, and look at this, because diseases don't know parties, they don't know tribes and all those things. So those are issues that I feel, in terms of oversight, we need to strengthen. Your finance committee, as we are asking and pushing for these things, what is this component, and following it up completely to see that level of support was given and it actually reached. When it comes to oversight, I mean, hustlers and all that, what are we doing other than the fund itself? What other incentives are we giving them so that they're able to uptake? And finally, and more importantly, once the small guys decide to do business, please allow them to do business. Let's give them opportunities to do. Let's shield them away from, all this, because climate change and all these other external factors that they don't have control over. And then we now add the political situation is not fair.
Yeah, but even you leaders from the county assemblies forum perspective, you're the Secretary General there, you know that their levies for businesses are too many. Have you raised any concerns at the county level that these young people, you're taxing them too much and too many times? They can barely keep up with the number of licenses that are just needed. You cannot, even if you want to start a business today, the next thing you know, somebody is knocking at your door, you need this license, you need that license. Why can't it just be a consolidated license? Once you pay for one, you know you're good to go.
And that's, in the campaign period, all these guys who are running for these things were saying that's what they're going to do. We are here now. Of course, we are now working on it in the next financial year so that we sort it out. But even having said that, there are all these incentives. When in Sonko's regime, when he came in, he had inherited own source revenue of about 12 billion. And then decides parking to drop it from 300 to 200. And you ask him, where is this 100 going to come from? But you see, it's populist. Then again, we move now. Sakaja is talking about weekends. We don't do parking, we'll give you free parking. It's nice, and it looks very good. But in terms of that deficit, where are you going to get it from? Mama Mbogas, when they were used to be levied Kidero's time, there used to be something called a decentralization unit. They used to collect 1 billion shillings. From the 20 shillings of Mama Mbogas. Then regime change, you now say, they were good. That's how we dropped. You get? So the role where we are as county assemblies, we're able to request here and there. And somebody, when we're looking at the correspondences, talked about automation. Automation needs to take us to the next level. It is not taking us there. It's taking us backwards. And then maybe people have a chance to see, behind what's happening and misdeclaring what is supposed to be gotten there. That's now when we now ask Senate, which Article 96 is supposed to strengthen the role of county governments, strengthen the county assembly so that they can help you in terms of pushing for oversight. But if we have all these issues that, people are just doing their own things, like we're building silos and they're thinking in silos, we're not able to ask ourselves, how do we ensure if this is where we got them at 2023, 2024, we must ensure that own source must go up. We must ensure this regime is like this. If there's a law that is now in your house that is called the County Government Revenue Raising Process Bill. And that discussion is not happening in the counties. So that now the plan is to have, when you want to raise a levy, you now seek concurrence with the CS Finance. Why don't you have a clearinghouse to look at the taxation issues that might be cutting across, as opposed to you small people come to talk to us big people? So that conversation needs to be wider, and we stop looking at this over us and all that. We start looking at whatever business is happening in Nairobi, Kiambu, Lamu, whatever, cumulatively translates to all this money that comes to the national level, and we're able to give everyone a fairable share. But most importantly, we must create an environment that is good and conducive for business activity countrywide.
Okay, Njeri, you mentioned austerity measures. How does austerity measures look like in your view? Where do you start? Because you remember that most of those things are passed in Parliament. So if you suggest cutting down a budget for the legislative arm of government, how then do you expect them to pass that same proposal? It will be shot down.
Trevor, it's not only at the national level, even at the county level, there's a lot of pilferage. And Trevor, we have CECs at the county level, and I don't think people do really have an issue with paying tax. There's something in business we call ROI, return on interest. If I pay taxes on investment, if I pay taxes to the government of Kenya, and if I go to hospital, I am catered for. So my health is not a problem anymore. So I'm not one disease away from poverty. If I pay taxes and the education of my children, is catered for, I do not have an issue. If I pay taxes and there's a good business environment, I'm able to thrive. I'm actually able to make the money to comfortably pay the taxes and also be able to run my business. If I pay taxes and perhaps I'm able to access good, affordable housing, I do not have an issue with that. That is why I said it is a conversation that the government needs to have with the people of Kenya. You cannot enforce collection of taxes on people, Trevor. When it comes from a goodwill perspective, when people see that you're actually delivering to them on the core mandate and the basic necessities for the common mwananchi, people will actually be very comfortable paying taxes, which is why I say things like health, they are devolved at the county level. And I'm not only speaking in terms of Kirinyaga County. If you go to other counties, and maybe perhaps Eddie can tell us this because he's a senator, you find that the basic complaints of mwananchi are that you can only find something like Panadol at, county hospitals. And, these things, there are things that we cannot do in silos. The national government and the county government must take responsibility. He talked on harmonization of taxes. It is also something that we also need to discuss. Cutting down costs comes from the national government and the county government level, because it cannot be that more than 50% of what we collect goes to recurrent expenditure. And only a meager, I think, around 17% goes to development. Because at the end of the day, then people will feel like we're paying taxes, but you guys do not deliver to us. And we are losing a lot of money.
Yeah.
We also need to improve how we collect our taxes. It is not only about expanding the tax base, but it's also about improvement of how we collect so that we know that we do not lose money along the way. So for me and where I stand, I think it just requires goodwill from the national government and county government so that we can squeeze in as much as we can, downsize what we do not need, and only keep what we need so that we can have a functional economy, because we need to recover and we have debt to pay and we have to. And we cannot afford to continue borrowing from the Shylocks like China. We need to be able to have a proper running government.
Yeah, and Eddie, that is the biggest conversation from the Finance Committee which you're in. I mean, where do we go then from here? Because there are certain realities that we are faced with. Borrowing is not an option that much. In fact, if you borrow locally, then you squeeze out the people from borrowing themselves and the money circulation goes down. We have debts that we have to pay. We have political goodwill that we need. We also have development that's there. What would you advise from where you stand, considering our realities today? Even David Lee said this, that if somebody has a better proposal, bring it. What is that better proposal?
A number of things, Trevor, and I like the conversation that my brother and my sister here bring. First of all, I still want to caution that, the county governments are established with particular functions. And those functions, research that follow those functions, sometimes are not fundamentally functions that are supposed to cascade what we call investment. They're not supposed to be an avenue for investment. So, and that's why you find that our Constitution under Article 203 only gives about 15, up to 15% of what is in the national government. So the bulk of money that we're talking about here remains with the national government. This is a very critical issue to understand, Trevor, because I don't want us to have a conversation whereby you feel like you want to gag counties. And the reason why I'm saying this is because my colleague who is in the County Assemblies Forum must start cushioning, the counties. Because the money that the counties are entitled to from the national government as a share of the national revenue, which is not even ordinary revenue. It's only ordinary revenue. It's not all other revenues that are collected, including debt and stuff. That money must come to counties devoid of their potential for what we call on-source revenue. On-source revenue is something that's not in the Constitution, right? And it is something that we want to cultivate to be able to build a place for investable capital by counties. But as far as Schedule 4 is concerned, the functions that are given to counties, those functions are budgeted for and must be funded for within the context of national budget. And that is the conversation. Then number two for Njeri is that when that money is going to the counties, we must always be alert to the fact that all the Schedule 4 functions are solving basic needs. If you look at education, it's only ECDC education. That is just early childhood education. It's not going to primary, junior, secondary schools to universities. It's not there. And then if you look at something like agriculture, is with the basic level of basic production, right? So all the functions are just basic need functions, okay? And now the biggest problem is that the depression that we have had with the government not sometimes releasing these funds on time. We just passed DORA, whereby we had a problem with those counties being denied those monies. Mm-hmm. So it makes it impossible for these counties to even function in a more effective and good manner. And that's why I was telling you, you ask a very good question, why is the National Assembly and the Senate not leading in terms of these tax problems and helping to solve? The answer is very simple, the invisible hand that is coming from State House. And this is a very honest conversation whereby we see a lot of State House influence on an independent body as the National Assembly. I mean, we have seen Jubilee MPs all compromised in the National Assembly. We have seen Jubilee senators all compromised in the National Assembly, that there is some development in State House. We have seen a number of MPs compromised by State House from ODM side. So then how then in fact, this is one of the questions that is being addressed in these bipartisan talks. It's actually an agenda. The idea that we cannot kill Article 4 of the Constitution, whereby we are a multi-party democracy that must have a system where majority versus minority are oversighting one another. So I wanted to put that there. But now on the issue of tax, Trevor, the reason why we are overtaxing our people is because of what my sister Njeri has talked about, which is the issue of debt. Because the first charge in all the monies we are raising is debt. And then the second, of course, is pension, because you have to pay pensioners. But this government has developed some attitude. I'm calling it an attitude because it's not based on serious economic principle. Some attitude that if I can demonstrate to IMF, and if I can demonstrate to concessionary loaners, international loaners, that I can be able to tax my people, then I can be able to get more loans. And that's a very dangerous principle, because the moment you start doing that you want to demonstrate to IMF and the external people that you can be able to, you've got the capability of collecting taxes, and therefore you're squeezing everything out of your people, the problem you're doing is you're not giving your people chance to build capital and be able to do business. Because the government is not in the business of doing business. The government is in the business of creating an environment that is enabling for businesses to thrive. But if you're overtaxing businesses, if you're making it impossible for people to invest in your country, you start having what we call financial flights outside the country. Investors want to move out. They don't want to invest in your country. The labor is too expensive, because the more you are taking out of them the disposable income they can get, the more labor want to respond by saying, hey, Trevor, wanna add me more money. Yeah. Give me more money. And then the investors are like, I cannot go where labor is so expensive. Yeah. And then you are having this cyclical problem. So what is the solution to this? The solution to this, in classical economics, which I hope that the government can be able to start thinking about, is how do you solve the question, two questions. One, the question of pricing. Yeah. How do you bring interest rates down? Because if you look at our benchmark rate in CBK, right now it's overshot 9%. In fact, it was just 8% when Ruto took over this regime, but then now it's over 9%. So because if you can control ultimate price, which is interest rate, you can also be able to control prices of goods and services. Okay. And then the biggest thing that you must do is you must be able to start solving the issue of money supply. Okay. How do you enhance credit facilities to people, to these businesses that are small, to Mama Mboga, to the border people, to build an asset base that can be able to make it possible for people to see that there is money that is being spent in Kenya. Yeah. Therefore, let us bring businesses in Kenya, and then those businesses, big businesses, will come into the country, and then it makes it possible to have a reasonable taxation regime. Okay. Because if you think about Facebook, if you think about Google, if you think about PwC, McKinsey, all these people, because they are able to invest to the best level possible, you can get the best tax possible, but only if you're given the environment to succeed.
Yeah, Shege. jump into
yes, I wanted to
conclude
jump
this conversation, then we're going to bipartisan.
Yeah, because the senator talked about counties number 1 on the Schedule 4, that they're basically basic needs functions. No, I don't think so, because if you look at the trade, for example, it's a fully devolved function. There's nothing basic about trade. It's creating opportunities for guys in Migori to be able to thrive in whatever business that they can do. Issues like tourism. I need to come to Migori and, we've overstretched Mombasa and, the circuit where the Masai Maras and all that. What is it that we need to spur up so that people are able to look at the other opportunities are there? Finally, on the issue of agriculture and value addition and those kinds of things, what is it that we are able to do and concentrate on that? We start small at whatever level, do some value addition, and we're able to do, today you can see peanuts coming from Tanzania and all that. We have these things here, but now we are still boxed in trickies. I don't know, when you look at the issue of debt, the government should be able to go, and they're in a capacity to get debt at a very good rate outside there. The one that they follow up, domestic borrowing, should be left to the players locally, and so that we should not be competing with our own government in getting access to capital, and that needs to be a discussion.
I don't mean to be rude, but for what you're just saying, are you aware that in this budget, of the 700 billion deposit, or rather deficit, are you aware that the government midterm strategy is to be able to get 500 billion out of Kenya?
Local.
So it's not a matter of should. It's a matter of telling this government that is having bad policy, and you should point at
and that's why I'm saying these guys at the national level, that's the kind of oversight we want. Them telling us, no, hey, because this conversation is also it's not a very basic conversation. Somebody might need that understanding, and that's what you guys at the national level should be able to oversight collectively because legislatures are supposed, first of all, to be collective oversighting government. Forget about parties first, and that discussion needs to happen there as a starting point. And then, of course, number 2, living within our means. We need to find a way. Everyone here, I don't have this kind of money. I can't drive this car. You manage. But once you get into government, now all of a sudden, because it's not your money, you are now able to do a few things more. On the issues of exchequer releases to counties, it's a big problem.
That's true.
Because of these delays, what counties do? They borrow banks in terms of overdrafts, and overdrafts are very expensive ways of borrowing. So that they're able to pay, at least even salaries. And those are things that are basic in my view. And you as Senate especially need to be able to cushion at least the basic. Every shilling that is collected in tax should go 85 this way, 85% and 15%. So that we don't find that up to 4 months in, when national government is unable to pay its workers, that's when people realize, there's a problem. There's been a problem in the counties for the last 4 or 5 months. You get the point? So that discussion needs to be more national and look at what's happening in the counties as people who are supposed to be safeguarding governments at the county level, so that we're able to move as a country too.
Jerry.
I just want to respond to Eddie. The issue of buying MPs is neither here nor there, and Eddie knows that. Naturally, people gravitate to power. So it is not about buying people in power. And Trevor, what we have, I think, as a nation, the major issue is oversight. Oversight is central to all issues of governance. At the county level, at the national level, Senate was mandated to oversight county governments. They do not have an oversight fund, but they can still be able to do the same from the national level. I mean, they have been doing so little from where I stand to support and to ensure that they have helped in oversighting county governments. Members of the county assembly do not have something they're pushing for now, the Ward Development Fund. So literally, they are at the mercy of the governor. The governor can decide that they will not come to launch or do any development projects in your ward just because you're raising perhaps questions on the floor of the county assembly or being purported to be fighting or not supporting the governor. So at the end of the day, Trevor, our issues come from oversight, and Eddie cannot run away from oversight. Just because he is not in the Kenya Kwanza government or was not elected on perhaps any Kenya Kwanza party ticket does not take away his power to oversight the government. So let him also take responsibility. And all the elected members in the opposition, let them also take culpability in this. This is not something that you will tell the people is the Kenya Kwanza government that threw to you this budget. You must also be part and parcel of this.
But you're saying buying MPs is neither here nor there, and yet you're saying oversight is also important.
You
How
know,
do those two things
what I said is, Trevor,
every bill is voted for. So if
no
they're not
MP
aligned to one side,
yes,
how can they then oversight?
Trevor, I have said that MPs have not been bought. What I said is naturally, people align to the government. People align to power, and that is a basic law of nature.
Isn't that a problem, though?
It is an issue, and I have said oversight is the major issue that we have in our governance system, because you find then we do not have perhaps people who speak from an independent point of view.
Yeah.
At the county assembly level, perhaps at the National Assembly level, at the senatorial level.
Okay.
So we need to take charge from an individual perspective. As Njeri Maina, the county MP Kirinyaga, I need to take charge on a personal capacity. Eddie also needs to take charge on a personal capacity. It can't be now it is a blanket conversation and we're saying this is what the Kenya Kwanza government is pushing to us, because he has the mandate and I have the mandate and everyone else who's elected has the mandate.
Can we just separate issues? Because I think there's confusion here, with a lot of respect to my sister Njeri, because she's elected fundamentally to the National Assembly of Kenya, whose fundamental function is to oversight the executive. And I'm seeing I think it is she's trying to be smart by removing the conversation from oversighting national government to talking about counties, and trying to say, one, that it is the counties that are taxing people. That's what Kenyans are getting out there. When I listen to her as a layman, is that first of all it is the counties that are taxing people, which they are not. Counties don't tax people to the extent that the national government is to be. There are some levies like entertainment levies here and there, but the taxation they're talking about is primarily national government. And then number two, it is the counties that have got massive wastage of resources, which I've told her a number of times that the counties only get 15% of the total money we raise in the country, what we call ordinary revenue, and the national government remains with everything else. Now, what does this mean in terms of numbers, Njeri? The national government, the executive, remains with 2.2 trillion.
But a lot goes to service debt.
Let's wait. There's no but. There's about, I'm talking about your oversight role. The national government has got 2.2 trillion that they have, that is supposed to service Kenya the way you're talking about. If you look at consolidated funds in our budget right now, it is 968 billion. If you look at what the counties are getting, according to what you guys at the National Assembly passed as a defective DORA bill, is 385 billion. Come down to where you're calling legislatures, right? The National Assembly and the Senate, their budget is 40 billion. That's an oversight body. An enforcement body, which is the judiciary, the three arms of government, only has a budget of 23 billion. Where should we concentrate in terms of oversighting? Exactly, that's why you're in Parliament. So
and that is why you're in Senate, Eddie.
So that you can be able to actually look at this 2.2 trillion and how it is being utilized. Okay. And I'm not saying that we should not oversight counties, because we do. I actually sit in CPIC, and we have done a very good job in terms of holding counties accountable. We have summoned your governor to our committee. We have summoned my governor to our committee, of some of the Narok governor. We are oversighting these people, but where we are seeing pilferages and massive wastage of resources is in this 2.2 trillion. And that's what we are trying to correct, Trevor. And I'm telling you, as a young person, maybe you haven't taken time to read the history of this country. Njeri, there was a time that the executive, which is the presidency particularly, used to single-handedly make budgets and use the technical people in the treasury to make budgets, and then they will call you and tell you, hey, you're MP from where? If you don't bow to me, you won't get development to your place. If you won't do this, you won't, to the extent that they will use the administrative structures like the DCs, the PCs, to tell people that DC will appoint the MP, not the people. DC will appoint the councillor, not the people. And this is why in 1992 fights that people like Raila Amolo Odinga fought for, this democracy that came about and then, of course, was enshrined in our constitution in 2010, came with making Kenya a multi-party democracy, and most importantly, making your house, the National Assembly, under Article 95, give a new control over budget-making processes. So there is no any development that comes out of State House, but where you are. If you start encouraging MPs to start believing that there is some development in State House, and that they need to go to State House and kneel to the people in State House to get development, they need to gravitate, the word of use is gravitate, towards power. You are trading on a very dangerous place that even you, if you don't gravitate appropriately, the people of your county elected you overwhelmingly. I saw the numbers. They loved you. But I can tell you, if you go with that attitude, you want to be elected. Somebody will dictate over you and make sure that you cannot be elected as a young person, even if you've got connection with your people. Why? Because you must gravitate, you must bow and worship this despot.
All right.
Trevor,
I'll give you a chance to clarify.
With all due respect to Eddie, you know, I said it is a basic law of nature. And we're here not only to speak into an ideal situation, to speak as to the facts. And that is a fact, Eddie. And at the end of the day, I did not say that there's no loss or wastage of funds at the national government level. And I think, Trevor, I spoke to that. And it is a fact that can also be retrieved from here. What I'm saying is we need to be responsible from the national level of government to the county level of government. And Eddie, I mean, the structure of county governments is huge. I think he can tell you. You know, you have all these, and a lot of the money that you also get from the national government, a lot of it, the allocation goes to recurrent expenditure. So what I'm saying is we need to cut expenditure at the national government level and at the county government level. And Eddie is like taking it away. National Assembly does not operate on silo. You know that we are a bicameral government, and you know that the Senate has its core mandate as per the Constitution.
That's true.
Which is a county government. But you also know that when we pass laws, they come to your house and vice versa. So you cannot now refuse to take responsibility for the role that you also play in oversight.
Okay.
What I'm saying.
Just a moment.
You're both saying the same thing. Let's hear what Shaggy has to say.
Thank you for giving me instance, because Eddie is using Jerry as a punching bag.
Yes.
No, I'm not.
It is true.
But I just wanted to say one thing. That, the two houses of parliament at the national level need to understand that they have a collective voice to oversight government.
I agree.
You know,
100%.
collectively. So that minus the same way you guys did it when you're in Pride in Mombasa, when you're pushing for CDF, you know, you stop everything and now you look at something very square. Yes, that's the focus we need when you're supposed to be looking for Mwananchi support. But more importantly is that we also need to look at the development budgets and our ability to absorb, especially at the county level, ability to absorb development budgets. And if we are not able to, what mitigating factors are we doing or are we taking so that these counties are able to push development to end? Because recurrent, somehow, you look at the statistics, is over 90% consumed and absorbed. You look at development is less than 40%, and that is countrywide. So we need to find a way of getting development to Mwananchi as reasonable and as practical as possible. And then, of course, strengthen the offices of oversight in the county assemblies so that they're able to support oversight functions at the county.
Okay, we've run out of time. I'd like to give you all a chance for closing remarks. But Eddie, before we give a closing remark, you're in the Shakahola, in the committee investigating Shakahola, the massacre there. Are you getting any new revelations in terms of how did we get here and how are we getting out of it?
Sure, but just one 30-second statement. I want to say when I say MPs, I mean senators and members of National Assembly. And the reason why this is important is because both sides are bought by State House. And the reason why I'm saying that, we have seen some major bills being passed. DORA bill, the one for vertical share of revenue between national government and county government. My brother can tell you, I sit in the finance committee. It was passed with defective clauses. Defective clauses basically means that it had mathematical errors, it had misplacement errors of money, which the committee that I sit on pointed out that this was an error. You know, like for instance, you require that the division is supposed to be done using the last audited finances, and if you look at the National Assembly, the last audited finances were 2019-2020, and that was 1.7 trillion. The calculations that the Treasury did,
but did it, sorry to cut you short, did it go to division where national and did you widen those issues?
Yeah, so that's what I'm bringing out. The 1.7 trillion, but the Treasury calculated based on short that amount, which we pointed out that this is a mathematical error. There was placement errors of money for libraries. There was a placement error for the monies for medical. But these errors were pointed out by the finance and budget committees. Okay? Then when they're taken to Parliament, my brother, that is both National Assembly and Senate.
They use
these
the numbers.
People who support the regime passed them despite those errors.
Okay.
Why? Because they're both. They're supporting the government the way it is. And I'm telling you, even this finance bill, they are going to pass it with a lot of errors. This exercise of public participation might as well be a lot of ignorance, and they're going to ignore a lot of things and just pass it for the sake of aggregating towards power. That's what I was saying, that this thing happens in Senate as well as in National Assembly. Now, Shakahola, we have just... we have built a TOR to define our objectives according to how we were established in the House. We have only met one stakeholder. We were supposed to meet the CS of, internal security. But I think he was engaged. He didn't show up. But we engaged the AG, and when we engaged the AG, we realized how government actually failed to prevent this mass murder, and we realized it because Cap 108 of the Register of Societies Act of 1968 does establish a mechanism for both registration and regulations of this kind of communities. We have had about 100,000 societies registered, and out of that, 40,000 of them are actually religious societies. And out of those 40,000, there hasn't been proper engagement in terms of regulating them, in terms of looking at what they're working on, filing returns. In fact, the church run by Mackenzie, which was established in 2010, the first time the Registrar of Companies, the Registrar of Societies in the AG's office was interacting with them was April 22nd. That is when they will first of all ask for their returns. So there has been a serious lapse in government in terms of actually being able to ensure that these societies are doing what they're supposed to do. But that said, we haven't gone to the core of the issue of how did these inhuman and criminalities happen in Shakahola, because we are still engaging stakeholders. We are traveling to Shakahola on Thursday next week, and we hope that we'll engage as many stakeholders. But so far, even that function of the AG's office of failure to actually be able to keep people accountable, have crucial documents presented by these organizations, has shown a very big rupture between government and the people that we regulate. And there's a gap there that I think that we need to tighten in terms of regulations and even proper legislations to be able to encourage a proper accountability on churches as well as mosques and any other religious organizations.
Okay. Shaggy, I'll give you a chance for closing remarks. We've run out of time here. Going forward. And you can touch on the bipartisan talks in your closing remarks. What should their focus be? They've identified some areas. How should this move from here? There's a conversation whether should it be parliamentary, interparliamentary, or extra-parliamentary. What should you do?
My head was stuck with the Shakahola thing, but for me, as far as Shakahola is concerned, I think I hope you speed up your recommendations so that we see what is possible. For me, I think a commission needs to be set up, supported by these institutions. They should be able to pay something so that it can be self-regulating or whatever, but there has to be a mechanism. And of course, government can come up with the community policing as a way of understanding. Government needs to be knowing at the pulse of the hand what is happening at every corner of the time, at any given time. Now, on the issues of bipartisan talks, for us as county assemblies, from Azimio, areas that we feel that need to be more concretized is the issues of governance, with the specific mention of effective checks and balances at the county level. We need to strengthen the ability for county assemblies to do oversight, proper checks and balances. if we are going to ensure that devolution works. As far as Kenya Kwanza is concerned, one of the key issues is entrenchment of CDF and affirmative action fund, Senate oversight fund. How do you not have ward development fund in that kind of a discussion? Yet, these are the more devolved areas. I mean, they will tell you here when they go to their counties, the person who is actually interacting, even in development, is the guy who is elected and very close to the Mwananchi. If, in all fairness, ward development fund needs to be part of that agenda if we are serious about devolved funding. And by the way, it's not in the place of county assemblies to run them. We still feel that it's an executive function at the county level to run. But there should be a modality where a certain percentage goes directly to the 1450 wards countrywide. Finally, in extra, bipartisan talks, yes, but there should also, Trevor, needs to be a national conversation that also takes into place what other issues that stop the country. For me, is a political. Politics is a threat to this country, and we are all politicians. We cannot use politics to stop people's lives, to stop their businesses, to stop the economic growth. So there has to be a very good discussion that has more players other than or whatever. They pick outside and bring them to their talks. But we need to find a political solution to our politics and to our electoral processes. Secondly and finally is the issue of what other areas do we need to look at and bring into the talks. Issues of taxation, issues of economic empowerment and economic growth. We must be able to say it is our business, whether whichever side you are in, that this country needs to move forward. Finally, very finally on the media.
The real finally.
Media, the real finally. This is a good discussion. Keep it moving. Let's have more talks because people, when you talk about counties and county assembly, just think with these guys who just want mishahara, Sijui, I don't know all those things. We have content.
We'll talk about that at a time.
Continue having these kinds of discussions. We encourage so that people understand there's a lot happening at the national level, but also twice as much. It's only that is not reported in the counties.
Eddie, final remarks on this issue. Is there anything else that needs to be added in the Azimio bipartisan talks?
I mean, for Azimio, the reason why it's bipartisan talks is because the Azimio side had issues that they felt need to be addressed, and they have been very forthcoming with those issues. One of them is the issue of the election that has just passed, which is the question of how can the servers be audited. And that forensic audit is not a lack of imagination by Azimio community, because Article 86 of our Constitution requires that kind of process, to the extent that you are transparent running elections. And that is why we have got what we call the Election Act 2011, Section 44. Actually, both A and B requires an audit of the elections. If you look at the IBC's own act, Section 23, also requires the auditing of IBC assets. So it's a practice that we must encourage, and there's nothing wrong with that. If the elections were free and fair, there's nothing wrong with auditing the servers. Number two is the fact that we are going to another election 2027, and there is need to be able to put a referee that everybody agrees on, and even the formula for getting that. Number three is the issue of high cost of living. There are policies that have been put in place that have deprived Kenyans fundamental opportunities to be able to thrive, and the government has just basically turned against its own people. We can correct that. And then number four is the issue that I was telling Njeri, a very simple issue of democratization processes in the country and anchoring the National Assembly and the Senate in the tenets of Article 4 of the Constitution, and encourage that multipartyism so that MPs are not bought. Then the last one that I saw coming out, because the other side had tried to hint around, is just of outstanding constitutional issues that need to be addressed. But then as I finish, and I'm going to be perhaps ask this just in the psyche and the mind of Kenyans, and I'm going to say that UDA has an agenda. But the fundamental question that the Kenyans should ask themselves, can that agenda only be able to be achieved by one single community? That's actually the single question that the churches are asking today. Everybody's asking today. The papers are asking here today, that are you convinced that the UDA agenda can only be achieved by one single community.
Okay. Njeri,
that's something we need to ask.
Final remarks, Njeri.
Religion is the opium of the people, Trevor. So what happened in Shakahola has happened even in developed nations like the USA. But it must never happen again, and to such an extent, and with, just casual lack of supervision, which means that systems and people in government refuse to do what they were supposed to protect the people of Kenya, which is why the president has appointed a commission of inquiry to look into the matter and to engage all stakeholders so that we can have a way forward on regulation of religion in Kenya, which is such an emotive issue for a lot of Kenyans. And what I want to say in regard to the bipartisan talks, Trevor, I'm glad that, we have the cost of living on the table as a discussion, because I feel that is where the real agenda is. All these other things and nitty-gritties about power sharing are about making sure that certain people, get something out of government. But when we have the real conversation focusing on Wanjiku, I am happy. And I'm also glad that we have a timeline. They gave us a timeline of some of the issues within 30 days and others within 60 days. And to Eddie, I think I will never hear the last of, gravitating towards government. But that is a natural, it is a natural rule. But what I want to say is let all of us and as individuals elected, whether it's the National Assembly or Senate, ensure that we play our part to oversight the government, to legislate on behalf of our people, and to ensure that we represent them to the best of our capability. And Eddie, nobody dictates to, I tell people that I milk lions while seated on porcupines. If it's anything that I take pride in, Trevor, it is my independence of thought. So I do not believe, and I do not think that or foresee a future where someone will be dictating to me. And the president and the deputy president are people who like having a conversation, even with the Kenya Kwanza team. Let us Kenyans have or put our thoughts into the finance bill, on the TOT, on the cost of petroleum, the VAT rise, and digital taxing, so that we can ensure that we have this discussion and we have a finance bill that will cater for all Kenyans and be inclusive. And also ensure that the government is able to deliver for their people, because they cannot give what they do not have. All right. Thank you so much for making time this morning. That has been it. Enjoy your weekend. My name is Trevor Mbida. All right. Coming up next is Willis Raburu on Level Up. Shortly.